Hey, everybody, welcome back to Reason and Theology. Your host, Michael. On a Saturday, I wanted to go over the comments from Bishop Athanasius Schneider that has been certainly creating some waves on social media. His comments in reference to disobeying the Pope when it comes to Latin Mass restrictions. I wanted to address that. This is a theme that I've been continually seeing from Schneider, where he effectively takes the position of the SSPX on the matter. So I'd like to touch on that. But first, I want to point you to my new free ebook that is available to you again for free right here. Church Chaos, Biblical Insights for Confused Catholics. What you'll do to get a free copy of it is go to reasonandtheology.com. You'll see a little pop-up. Just simply click on it, put in your email, and bam, right there, you get the PDF for free. If you're confused about the situation in the Catholic Church, you don't know why things are happening the way they are, you see the Pope doing this and that, and you see bishops saying all kinds of things, and you're just really confused as to why is this happening in Catholicism. This is the book for you. I not only give biblical precedents for our times, but I also give biblical insights on how to properly respond. So certainly check it out. Again, reasonandtheology.com. I wanted to take a look at just two clips that were made by Bishop Athanasius Schneider, as well as some other comments that he made in an interview back in December of last year. So this is something that has been going on for a while that I've noticed from him, where again he's basically toting the party line of the SSPX, which is certainly an odd position given the fact that he's not formally a member of the society. So I do want to look at that. However, I will say, I've had Schneider on the show before. I think he's a good guy. But on this point, he's dead wrong. And I think that actually the content and the position that he's adopted here is certainly harmful to people. And for that reason, out of charity, I think Catholics need to speak up and say what the truth is here and resist the dissent that Schneider is pushing for. Ironically, he's not going to couch it as dissent. He's going to couch it as obedience to tradition, but that's pretty much what every person in the world who has ever gone into schism or promoted heresy has said. So just because you claim to have fidelity to tradition doesn't necessarily mean you do. And whenever you're blatantly saying we need to disobey the Pope on this particular matter, it's absolutely clear, okay, this person is pushing for dissent. Perhaps out of good intentions, not questioning his intentions. I imagine his intentions were good, but I also think that Martin Luther's intentions were good. So nonetheless, we need to combat error whenever it becomes this profound. Let's go over the video. I'm going to share my screen, and you should be able to see it. This is a clip on Twitter. Let's take a quick look at it.
Excellency, another Mass, another question on the Latin Mass. What criteria or rules for discernment should priests use when they are told by their bishop that they can no longer celebrate the Latin Mass, and yet they feel called in their conscience to continue to celebrate it for the people?
So again, the context is priests who feel in their conscience they need to continue to celebrate the Missal of 62 when their bishop, and also when the Pope, has restricted its use in their particular circumstances.
Yes, the criteria that this is a wrong obedience towards the bishop. The bishop is here and the Pope abusing their powers for the harm of the church. And so these priests can say, I cannot obey here because if I will obeying, I will cooperating to bring a harm, spiritual harm for the church. And
do you hear that? So if one obeys the church on this particular point, they would be bringing about a spiritual harm for the church. So it's not true obedience to obey the Pope and the bishop on which particular missal as a Roman Rite priest they are going to celebrate. It's actually a matter of harm. It's harmful if you obey the Pope here. So it's not a matter of disobedience. Rather, it's a matter of obedience to the good of souls. I'm going to dissect all of this here in a moment, but just kind of setting the stage for you.
The souls. And in this case, the apparent disobedience is basically an obedience to the constant, perpetual sense of the church, of the popes and the saints of the ages.
So again, it's not an obedience to the Pope that one is doing here. If they were to go along with what the Pope and the Bishop are saying, insofar as they're restricting the Missal of 62, that's not an obedience, because rather one is now being disobedient to the tradition and the sense of the church. And so, since there's this duty to preserve sacred tradition, we have to preserve that even over against obedience to the hierarchy. This is sounding very, very familiar. It should remind you of the Protestant Reformation in some ways. That's also certainly the SSPX position.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think that's it. It's that simple. It's for the priest looks to the good of the spiritual welfare of the people in front of him, and says, I cannot have to serve the spiritual welfare of these people, and I have to obey the tradition.
Yeah, that's called Protestantism, which I found ironic, since somebody in the comment section then posted, "Here I stand, I can do no other," and then presented a picture of Martin Luther at the Diet of Worms. I thought that was a little interesting. Here's one other clip from the same interview.
There's another question kind of related, anticipating masses that may have to be celebrated despite the restrictions. This one person asks, many people I know are starting to think about acquiring buildings to anticipate the Holy Father's further suppression of the Latin Mass.
You hear that? So they're talking about acquiring buildings so that they will have the means to disobey the Pope and the local bishop on which missal in the Roman Rite is going to be celebrated.
Does that make sense? And what kind of buildings should they think about acquiring? Closed Catholic churches, storefronts, or old schools at their commercial buildings?
Yes, I think it would be meaningful to do this, because we don't know exactly the future. We have to be prepared.
There you go. I mean, he's outright saying, yep, we need to go ahead and start making these means to dissent from the Pope and local bishop available to the faithful.
We hope and pray that the Pope will not simply abolish the traditional Mass. But in any case, the restrictions are already there. And therefore, it is meaningful to acquire such buildings. It depends on the situation of the place. Better, of course, a church building, maybe even a building from another worthy sacred building, even of other Christian communities, when they will sell these. It's better than simply another secular building. But if there
sorry
another secular building, but if there is no other possibilities, of course we can acquire a school building or other, and inside transform it in a true church.
Okay, so there it's absolutely clear he is presenting the SSPX position on the matter. Somebody asked in the chat, can the Pope entirely ban the Missal of 62? Yes, he can. You need to go and watch this presentation that I offered. It's called "Can the Pope Ban the Latin Mass?" More than 5 quotes, kind of a play on a Taylor Marshall video there. Go and watch that, and you will get an in-depth presentation on that. But the answer is yes, he can. Should he? That's a different question. Should he? I personally don't think so. Again, my opinion on the issue with Traditionis Custodes is I think the situation could have been handled better without resorting to such strict measures. But can he do such things? Can he impose the restrictions that he offered in Traditionis Custodes? Yes, it's within his authority. Was it the best use of his authority? Was it the best solution? I'm not so sure about that one. I'm open to being persuaded on it, but the more I look at it, I'm not so sure that was the best way to handle the problem with the radical traditionalists. I think there are other ways to deal with it. And then one other point here. This is from something in December of 2022 from Schneider. By the way, look where it's at. Look what website it's at. The SSPX website. Interesting that they post his comments here. For all intents and purposes, I see Schneider as just, again, toting the party line for the SSPX. Though he may not formally be a member of the SSPX, it seems that he formally adheres to the content of the SSPX. So he might as well be at this point. But here's his comments that just kind of back up what we just heard, so that people may, the people who say, well, you're maybe taking them out of context. No, not really. He's been saying this for a while. He says here, we must continue even if in some cases, and they're talking about clandestine masses, we must continue even if in some cases we say that we cannot obey the Pope at this time because he has issued these commandments or orders, which obviously undermine the faith. So the Pope, with these restrictions, is undermining the faith. Not restricting a particular missal. He's undermining the faith. He's equating the missal with the faith, of which take away from us the treasure of the liturgy, as if they don't still have the treasure of the liturgy with the Missal of 69. It is the liturgy of the whole church, not his. He's not taking away the whole liturgy, but okay. But that of our fathers and of our saints, so we have a right to it. And yet it's also a liturgy, the Missal of 62, that is discontinuous with some of our fathers and saints. For instance, they practice communion under both kinds, or communion in the hands. I'm not necessarily in favor of communion in the hand today, but I will recognize it's the venerable tradition of the first millennium, both East and West. And so if we're going to use this argument of, well, he's taking away the practice of our fathers and saints, well, the Missal of 62 does that in some pretty key areas. So be consistent and apply that to the Missal of 62 as well. It's a really bad argument. In these cases, even if we formally disobey, here's how, and again, for all intents and purposes, I imagine his intentions are good here, but this is how Satan works. Satan presents things as good when in fact they're evil. Again, I'm not saying that he's trying to harm souls or anything like that, but at the end of the day, his position does not come from a good source. It's from the source that takes good and twists it and calls it evil, and takes evil and twists it and calls it good. Watch this. Here we have the twisting of disobedience and turning it into a virtue in true obedience. Again, that's not the voice of God. Watch this. In these cases, even if we formally disobey, we will obey the whole church of all time. Again, that is twisting evil and turning it into, twisting a good, I should say, that is obedience to the church, and turning it into evil. That is, we need to disobey the Pope. And likewise, taking something that is evil, disobeying the church, and twisting it and turning it into something good. We're obeying the church for all time. This isn't an issue of obedience to the church of all time. Restricting the Missal of 62 is not an issue of somehow restricting access to sacred tradition. That's not what it is. So it's not obedience to the church of all time, as if the whole church has been Latin Rite and Roman Rite anyway. And even by such formal apparent disobedience, we will honor the Holy See. Again, here's that use of twisting things. We will honor the See by guarding the treasures of the liturgy, which is a treasury of the Holy See, but which is temporarily restricted or discriminated against by those who currently occupy the high offices in the Holy See. I imagine Luther could have said the exact same thing. I'm not really, being disobedient to the Pope. Rather, I'm actually valuing what the popes of the ages have valued, and that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so, again, it's a twisting of things. Truly unfortunate. And so he goes on to, again, promote this concept of dissent. And he tries to give historical examples which are not analogous. But okay, so there it is. Now, let me grapple with some of this. Number one, I would say his position, because there's a number of problems here. But one problem is the position assumes the Missal of 62, which is erroneously called the Latin Mass or Tridentine Mass, the Missal of 62 is somehow synonymous with the faith. We saw that in the interview. And it assumes the Missal of 69 doesn't sufficiently pass on the faith. It assumes both of those things, that the Missal of 62 is somehow equated with the faith, so that if you restrict it, you're now restricting the faith. And we need to disobey it, because if a Roman Rite priest is being required to celebrate the Missal of 62, not in an abusive way, but just, in the way according to the rubrics, then that's not good enough, because it doesn't sufficiently pass on the faith. You see, his argument doesn't make sense if the Missal of 69 does sufficiently pass on the faith and the tradition of the church. It only makes sense if it assumes the Missal of 69 doesn't pass on the tradition of the church sufficiently, and the Missal of 62 is somehow synonymous with the passing on of sacred tradition. And one point here we could address is Summorum Pontificum, where you have Benedict XVI saying, rather, it is a matter of twofold use of one and the same rite, in reference to the extraordinary and ordinary form. He says they're twofold use of the same rite. And so he's not saying like one is this rite and this other one, the Missal of 69, is somehow a different rite. He's saying it's the same rite. Now, if they're the same rite, they're transmitting the same faith. You can't make the argument that one is not passing on the faith if it's still the same rite. Moreover, we could point out that everything substantially that we can find out that passes on the faith, we could point out everything in the Missal of 62 that passes on the faith is still substantially found in the Missal of 69. So even if we call it the same rite, but then take the argument that, well, even though we're calling it the same Roman rite, it's not, it's just a legal fiction, because I know some people take that position. Well, Benedict didn't think it was a legal fiction, but more importantly, again, everything that you see in the Missal of 62 that is a vehicle for sacred tradition is still in the Missal of 69 as a vehicle for sacred tradition. It's still there. So that's one problem. Another problem here is the position assumes the Missal of 69 is itself harmful to souls. We heard that again in the first clip. This is somehow harmful to souls if we're not continuing the Missal of 62, because somehow the Missal of 69 is defective and is harmful to souls. Otherwise, if we're going to say that the Missal of 69 is not harmful to souls, it's good to souls, he couldn't make the argument that he made that we have to somehow resist the Pope and the local bishop and their restriction of the Missal of 62. He couldn't make the argument about somehow this is going to be harmful to souls. I would say this is condemned by Pope Pius VI in Auctorum Fidei, 1794. He says this: the church, which is ruled by the Spirit of God, could have established discipline. And this is something he's condemning. This is a proposition he's condemning. So this is something that he is not in favor of. He's not teaching this. The church, which is ruled by the Spirit of God, could have established discipline, which is not only useless and burdensome for some Christian liberty to endure, but which is even dangerous and harmful and leading to superstition and materialism. He condemns this as rash, false, scandalous, dangerous, offensive to pious ears, injurious to the faith and to the Spirit of God, by whom it is guided, at least erroneous. And there's a number of things that were going on at that time that were a little different than what's going on in the claim that we're hearing from Schneider today. However, the part there that is condemned, one of the parts that is condemned, is the claim that the church in its discipline could impose something that is dangerous and harmful. He might not be saying the Missal of 69 is somehow leading to superstition or anything. Yeah, there's some discontinuity there. But what is condemned in part is the claim that the church's discipline could be dangerous and harmful to souls. Now, the church's revision of the Missal of 62 to the Missal of 69 is a matter of discipline. Yes, the liturgy is a vehicle for tradition, so it's more than just discipline. But again, the substance of the passing on of tradition is still there in the Missal of 69. So one can't call it somehow dangerous. One can't say, well, if you're restricting the Missal of 62, that's now dangerous to souls because the Missal of 69 doesn't properly transmit the faith. That's a condemned proposition. I want to also read another quote here to you. I read this last night. It just further substantiates this point. I've pointed to numerous theologians who have backed this up. And this is a guy who's actually relatively friendly to the SSPX, Arnaldo Vidigal Xavier da Silveira. He says this in his work, Can Documents of the Magisterium of the Church Contain Errors? This is coming from page 21. He says, nor can the prayers of the sacred liturgy, approved directly or indirectly by the chair of truth, contain errors. Lex orandi, lex credendi. The law of prayer is the law of faith. How could the church, by the prayers it recommends, instill into souls principles opposed to the faith? Now, the SSPX does make that claim that in and of itself, properly celebrated, the Novus Ordo is harmful to souls because it bears within it a poison, harmful to the souls who celebrate it and participate in it. So they do take that position. Whereas here, what we're seeing is the author and the theologian is noting, no, that's actually not the historical position. The prayers of the sacred liturgy approved directly or even indirectly by the Holy See cannot contain errors that is injurious to the souls of those who celebrate it and participate in it. He goes on, he says, here too, we are unable to delve deeper into the most interesting questions that this problem suggests. In order to satisfy readers desiring to have an overall view of the subject, we'll mention a few developments that this issue could have. The infallibility that exists in regards to ecclesiastical law does not imply that it is the most perfect possible, but only that it does not oblige the practice of sinful acts. So there's not going to be anything in it that is poisonous, injurious to souls, or recommends sinful acts. However, there are some things that could be criticized about it. It might not be the most perfect discipline. And I think that we could certainly critique the Novus Ordo in that sense and say, okay, well, in the transition from the Missal of 62 to 69, you do have some loss in some areas. And so there are some areas where the Missal of 69 could be reformed and made better and made more in line with the Missal of 62. So I do think that there are some imperfections in the Missal of 69, but is it injurious to souls? Is it poisonous to the faithful? No, not at all. And I'll connect the dots for how this ties in here in a moment. But it continues, the legislation of the church cannot oblige to the practice of mortal sins. This is unquestionable. It cannot even recommend them. Okay, so there certainly can't be anything in the liturgy that is in and of itself harmful to souls. Certainly abuses are harmful to souls, but nobody here is defending abuses. We're talking about what the Vatican, what Rome, I should say, has actually approved, and Rome doesn't approve of the abuses as we see in Traditionis Custodes, among other places. Well, how does this tie in? Well, again, Schneider's position has to assume that the Missal of 69 itself is harmful to souls, because if it isn't, if it is a preservation of sacred tradition that is not injurious to souls, but is beneficial to souls, well, then why can you then recommend disobeying the Pope's restriction of the Missal of 62 under the guise of we would be going with something that is harmful and that is not preserving the sense of the church and tradition and the faith? His argument only makes sense if you assume that somehow the Missal of 62 is analogous to the transmission of sacred tradition and the Missal of 69 is a corruption of it. Another point here. I would say his claim is that the claim that one should disobey the Pope under the guise of obedience to the faith, not only is that a twisting of something evil and trying to present it as good, and then taking something that was good and actually twisting it into evil actions. Not only is there that problem, which again, I assume his motives and intentions were not to do that. I don't have any reason to believe that like Schneider is saying, yeah, let me go and try to corrupt souls and try to twist things and aid the devil. I don't think that that's Schneider's intentions. I think his intentions really are to follow Christ and be obedient to him. Unfortunately, there are people who have good intentions, such as Martin Luther, who then introduce things that are very destructive and harmful to people. So I can't give him a pass, even if I assume his intentions are good. At the end of the day, I still have to say, no, this is the work of the enemy to try to take something good and then turn people to evil, and then twist something that is evil and try to present it as good, though unintentionally, I assume. In addition to that problem, I would say this assumes doctrinal errors. His position assumes doctrinal errors. So we're not just talking about an issue of somehow promoting schism, which it is that, promoting dissent, which it is that, twisting good and presenting evil, trying to present evil as good, which it is that. It's more than that. It also assumes doctrinal errors, I should say. Specifically about the Pope's authority over the liturgy. Let's talk about just a few of them. I'll share them on my screen so you can see what I'm referring to here. Okay, you should be able to see them now. The Council of Trent says, it furthermore declares that this power has ever been in the church, that in the dispensation of the sacraments, their substance being untouched, it may ordain or change what things soever it may judge expedient for the profit of those who receive. Let me stop there. Have the substance of the sacraments been untouched in the revisions from the Missal of 62 to 69? Yes. Yes. The substance of the sacraments are preserved in the Novus Ordo. Because again, the changes that you see between the Missal of 62 to 69 are not as significant as the changes between comparing the Missal of 62, erroneously called the Tridentine Mass, compared with a first century liturgy. There's much more discontinuity there. So certainly the Missal of 69 still preserves the substance of the sacraments. And so it has preserved that. But then it says, the Council of Trent says, it may ordain, that is the church. So the Pope and or the College of Bishops may ordain or change what things soever it may judge most expedient. Not what Schneider judges most expedient. Not what the layman judges as most expedient. What it, that is the universal organ of the church. The Pope, exercising his authority as a universal organ, or the College of Bishops, not individual bishops. It may ordain or change, and it has. It has. And it says, for the profit of those who receive or for the veneration of the said sacraments according to the differences of circumstances, times, and places. And this the apostles seem not obscurely to have intimated. So it's locating this in Scripture when he says, let a man so account of us as the ministers of Christ and the dispensers of the mysteries of God. That's from St. Paul. So it's locating that principle in sacred Scripture. So what we're hearing is a doctrinal error on part of Schneider, because it assumes that the Pope doesn't have the authority to discontinue or restrict the use of the Missal of 62 and require people to use the Missal of 69 with its revisions. It either assumes that the Missal itself cannot be changed to the degree it has, or that the Pope doesn't have the authority to require them to celebrate that particular Missal as opposed to another Missal, which is itself an error condemned by the First Vatican Council. So either way this thing shakes down, it's an error condemned by the magisterium. Here's from the First Vatican Council, which includes an anathema on those who dissent from this. Wherefore we teach and declare that by divine ordinance, so this is by divine law, the Roman Church possesses a preeminence of ordinary power over every other church, and that this jurisdictional power of the Roman Pontiff is both episcopal and immediate. It's immediate. You don't get to say as a bishop, no, I'm going to dissent from this. It's episcopal and immediate. Both clergy and faithful. So this is putting it right in the realm of the questioner's scenario, where he speaks of a priest who in good conscience can't celebrate the Missal of 69 and discontinue the use of the Missal of 62. Well, that's inappropriate, because one's conscience has to be formed by the magisterium. You don't get to say, I'm going to appeal to conscience. That's what the liberals do. You remember those guys? You try to say, hey, I can contracept based on conscience grounds. Well, no, you don't get to do that. because your conscience has to be formed by the magisterium. Both clergy and faithful of whatever right and dignity, both singly and collectively, so this is everybody, are bound to submit to this power, the power of the Pope, by the duty of hierarchical subordination and true obedience. That's obedience. What we heard from Schneider is, oh, well, though it seems like we're disobeying the Pope, we're really being obedient, not according to the First Vatican Council. And this not only in matters concerning faith and morals, so he doesn't have just this authority in matters of faith and morals, but here's the kicker, but also in those which regard the discipline and government of the church throughout the world. So faith and morals and discipline and government. So that includes the liturgy, because the liturgy is a matter of faith and morals and discipline and government. It has all those elements in the liturgy. It's all the above. But guess what? The First Vatican Council covered all bases and said all of the above. And you have to obey the Pope on this. And you don't get to say, I disagree on matters of conscience, condemned by the First Vatican Council. And an anathema is attached to those who disagree with it. If anyone then shall say that the Roman pontiff has the office merely of inspection or direction, and not the full and supreme power of jurisdiction over the church. And how was supreme jurisdiction defined? Well, we saw how it was defined, not only a matter of faith and morals, but also those which regard discipline and government. So for those who are denying that, not only in things which belong to faith and morals, but also in those which relate to the discipline and government of the church spread throughout the world, or assert that he possesses merely the principal part and not all the fullness of the supreme power, or that this power which he enjoys is not ordinary and immediate, both over each and all of the churches and over each and all the pastors of the faithful, that would include clergy, let him be anathema. I'm suggesting that Schneider's position assumes a doctrinal error that has been anathematized. Now, I'm not saying that Schneider's anathematized, because I don't know if he's really connected the dots and knows that what he's affirming has been anathematized. So I'm not going that far. But what I will say is the position he assumes has been anathematized. Moreover, Pius XII, Mediator Dei 58, it follows from this that the sovereign pontiff alone enjoys the right to recognize and establish any practice touching the worship of God. Did you hear that? The supreme pontiff, the Pope, has the right to recognize or establish any practice touching the worship of God. And then it goes on to introduce and approve new rites, as also to modify those he judges to require modification, which he did do. Both he and the College of Bishops. This wasn't something the Pope alone did. College of Bishops also accepted the modifications to the liturgy from the Missal of 62 to 69. So Pius XII, again in Mediator Dei, even in the preconciliar period, is noting the Pope has that sovereignty over the liturgy. He can modify the Missal of 62 to the Missal of 69. That's within his authority. But you have to assume somehow that he can't do that if you're going to say, but we have to maintain the Missal of 62 even at the expense of disobeying the Pope in order to preserve the faith and not harm souls. Moreover, Paul, and note again, it's what he determines needs modification, not what a bishop thinks. Not a bishop in Kazakhstan, not what an individual priest upon grounds of conscience determines, but what the church determines. Paul VI notes this: it is even affirmed that the Second Vatican Council is not binding. Some people were saying in his time, Vatican II is not binding. Sound familiar, right? There's still some people saying that today. That the faith would be in danger also because of the post-conciliar reform and guidelines. Sound familiar? Yeah, he's referring to effectively those who would push the SSPX, though this was prior to the SSPX really being formalized. It is effectively Lefebvre that he has in his crosshairs here. Because of the post-conciliar reforms and guidelines, which there is a duty to disobey to preserve certain traditions. Sound familiar? That's exactly what Schneider is saying. There's a duty to disobey because we have to preserve certain traditions. Paul VI says this: what traditions? Does it belong to this group and not the Pope, not the Episcopal College, not an ecumenical council to establish which of these countless traditions must be regarded as the norm of faith? So he's noting, look, some of these things that are being appealed to as tradition, first of all, aren't sacred tradition themselves. They're ecclesiastical traditions. And is it not the church and the magisterium that determines which of these ecclesiastical traditions will be preserved and which won't? Which of these disciplines will be preserved and which won't? Of course, it's up to the magisterium. But what Lefebvre was doing is saying, no, I, under my own private judgment, get to determine, hey, this is a tradition that I have to preserve at all costs. Well, sound familiar? That's Schneider, condemned by Paul VI. One other point I want to mention, going back all the way to St. Ignatius of Antioch, within living memory of the apostles at the turn of the 2nd century, says this: let no man do anything connected with the church without the bishop. It is not lawful without the bishop to either baptize or to celebrate a love feast. At this time, the liturgy was still being connected to the agape feast or love feast. So it's not licit, it's not lawful without the permission of the bishop to baptize or celebrate a love feast. And he's not just talking about on grounds of lyceity purely. He wants to point out how it's sinful to not obey the law of the church here. And again, he's talking about in the administration of the sacraments, do nothing without the bishop. So it's not just a matter of, have I crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's canonically? No, this is a matter of something that really does involve an element of sin. If you're going to disobey the church on this, there's certainly an element of sin involved. So this is not the way. This is not the way to recommend to people. So it's truly unfortunate to see Schneider take that position. I think he's in a position to do a lot of good for the church. And in fact, he's, again, I assume he has the best intentions, adopted positions that are very destructive to the souls and are now doing more harm rather than helping the church. There's certainly a crisis going on in the church right now. We need good men, especially bishops, to stand up and help us through this confusing time. We need good shepherds. Unfortunately, some of those men who are in that position aren't making good use of that and are instead saying things that aggravate the situation. They're not a solution to it. They're making it worse. They're aggravating it. They're leading people down a false path. People who are saying, okay, well, all right, I see that there's a false path going on here with liberalism in the church. Well, I want to steer clear of that. And they'll say, yeah, steer clear of that. Go down this path. But then this path too, that they're pointing them to in some cases, is also harmful to souls. So it's a misdirecting of souls rather than properly shepherding them and directing them. So it's sad to see. And it's sad that it even has to be addressed, but it seems that it's, again, making its rounds in social media and a lot of people are buying into it. So I felt I needed to address it. Well, anyways, I hope this has been helpful to y'all. Again, if you're confused about what's going on in the church today, because certainly there's chaos in the church, certainly there is confusion and there's a crisis. There's no way to deny that. If you're confused, why is this going on? Why is this happening? And how do I properly respond? I want you to check out this free ebook. Again, I'm making it available for free. Church Chaos, Biblical Insights for Confused Catholics. Go to reasonandtheology.com. You'll see a pop-up, click on it, put in your email, and it will give you the PDF. It's available for free, so no excuses. If you're confused as a Catholic and you're thinking about leaving, or you're discerning Catholicism, but you're just seeing all this chaos in the church, this is something you need to read. I give you biblical insights that gives you precedents, biblical precedents for the situation that we're in the church, going through in the church today, as well as biblical solutions on how to properly respond to this chaos and crisis in the church. Again, reasonandtheology.com. Certainly check it out. That's going to do it. Hit the like button and the subscribe button. And as I said, check me out, patreon.com/reason and theology if you want to support me. We'll see y'all later at, 5 p.m. Central. So it's going to be 3 hours and 15 minutes from now, back here on the channel where we're going to play the game authentic or not, where we're going to have contestants and they have to guess whether or not a quote that we present to them, along with a name and a face, whether or not that person actually said the quote or if it was somebody else. So stay tuned for that. Authentic or not, coming up 5 p.m. Central today. All right, we'll see you later. God bless.
Are you confused about how Catholic teaching authority works? With encyclicals, papal bulls, councils, and many other things, it's easy to get confused on what is authoritative and what is not. Fortunately, at maximusinstitute.com, I have prepared a course explaining the magisterium from A to Z. Visit the website and check out the course Understanding the Magisterium for more information. Is it possible that ancient aliens created other ancient aliens? Ancient alien theorists say yes. But then, is it also possible that ancient aliens created the ancient alien theorists? And are the ancient aliens and ancient alien theorists led by the Vatican, headed by the Pope? Ancient alien theorists and certain unnamed Catholic YouTubers say yes.
Tired of Catholic shows that peddle conspiracy theories that sound like something out of an Ancient Aliens episode? Check out Reason and Theology for a more reasonable take. Hey everybody, just wanted to tell you about my new free ebook, Church Chaos, Biblical Insights for Confused Catholics. If you are a confused Catholic and you're thinking about leaving the Catholic Church, or you're thinking about converting to the church, but you see that there's a crisis in the church and you're just unsure, this is the book for you. Again, it is free. Just simply go to reasonandtheology.com. You'll see a pop-up that comes up on your screen. Just simply click on it and you'll put in your email and it will provide you the free PDF ebook right then and there. Please check it out if you're confused about the situation in the Catholic Church today. reasonandtheology.com.